I never should have gone to that motel. It wasn't like I had a choice at the time. My boyfriend, Ryan, and I had been on the road for hours, heading back from a weekend trip to visit his family. A snowstorm had rolled in faster than expected, covering the highway in thick, blinding sheets of white. The roads were barely visible, and even though Ryan was trying to act calm, I could see his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. We needed to stop. That's when we saw the motel sign flickering in the distance. It was the only building for miles. Ryan glanced at me. Should we stop? I hesitated. Everything in me screamed keep driving, but the snow was getting worse. The car was sliding. We had no choice. Yeah, I muttered. Just for the night. The place was called the Silver Pines Inn, one of those old roadside motels that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Parking lot was nearly empty, just one other car parked near the front office. The neon vacancy sign buzzed faintly, casting a sickly red glow onto the snow. Ryan pulled up, and we sat in silence for a second, staring at the building. Something felt wrong. Come on, Ryan said, forcing a smile. It's just one night. We got out, grabbed our bags, and headed inside. The lobby was too warm, the air thick and heavy. An old CRT television buzzed in the corner, playing some static-filled news channel. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't blinked in hours. His name tag read Tom. Ryan handled the check-in while I looked around. The walls were covered in wood paneling, the kind that made everything feel smaller, darker. A single security camera was mounted in the corner, but when I glanced at the monitor behind the desk, I noticed something strange. The screen showed the parking lot, the hallways, the stairwell, but not the rooms. I don't know why that unsettled me so much. Tom handed Ryan the key. Room 109, he said, his voice flat. End of the hall. His eyes flicked to me, just for a second. Then he added, don't open the door if someone knocks. My stomach tightened. Ryan laughed, assuming it was a joke. Yeah, man. Got it. Tom didn't laugh. We left the office and made our way to room 109. The hallway was dim, the carpet old and damp-smelling. Most of the rooms had closed curtains, but one door near the end was slightly open, just an inch. A single, bloodshot eye peeked through the gap. I grabbed Ryan's arm. Let's go. He didn't see it. Our room was small, just a bed, a dresser, and a bathroom with a flickering light. A single window faced the parking lot, but the glass was too fogged over to see through. Ryan flopped onto the bed, exhausted. See? It's fine. I didn't answer. I kept thinking about what Tom had said. Don't open the door. That night, I woke up to the sound of shuffling outside. I turned toward Ryan. He was asleep. The noise came again. Slow, uneven footsteps, moving past our door. Then, a soft knock. I froze. It was gentle, almost polite. I held my breath, staring at the door. Knock. Knock. A pause. Then, a whisper. Let me in. I clenched the sheets, my heart pounding. It was right outside. Knock. Knock. The whisper came again, closer this time. Let me in. Ryan stirred beside me. I shook him awake, my hands trembling. Ryan, I whispered. Someone's at the door. He blinked groggily. Huh. Knock. Knock. His face paled. Then, the doorknob twisted. Ryan shot up, stumbling out of bed. Who's there? Silence. He grabbed his phone, turning on the flashlight, and moved toward the door. Ryan, I hissed. Too late. He pulled it open. The hallway was empty. No footsteps in the snow. No sounds. Nothing. Just wrongness. Ryan looked back at me. There's no one there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I heard it again. But this time, it came from the bathroom. A faint, wet whisper. Let me in. I sat up so fast my head spun. The bathroom door was closed. Ryan was still asleep. Then, slowly, the doorknob turned. I grabbed Ryan, shaking him awake. He sat up groggily. What? The door creaked open. The bathroom was dark, the air inside wrong. Heavy, pressing. A shape stood in the doorway. Tall, thin, grinning. Ryan didn't see it. He grabbed his phone and shined the flashlight toward the bathroom. The second the light hit the doorway, the shape was gone. Just gone. Ryan turned to me, frowning. Babe, there's nothing? Then he saw my face. The color drained from his. We're leaving, he said. We grabbed our bags and bolted, not even stopping to check out. As we drove away, I turned back toward the motel. In one of the windows on the second floor, a figure stood motionless, watching, smiling. We never spoke about it again, but 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was silence. Then, a soft knock, and a whisper, "Let me in." I don't know why I agreed to go on that date. I wasn't really into Alex, not in any serious way. We had met at a mutual friend's party a few weeks prior, and he seemed nice enough, charming, funny, well-dressed. But something about him felt off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on, just a gut feeling that made me hesitant, but I ignored it. Maybe I was just being paranoid. So, when he asked me out to dinner at an old Italian place downtown, I said yes. The evening started out normal. He picked me up outside my apartment, his car spotless and new, the kind of vehicle that doesn't feel lived in. There were no water bottles in the cup holders, no receipt stuffed in the side compartments. Just empty, clean, perfect. That should have been my first warning sign. We made small talk on the drive, but every time I spoke, I got the unsettling feeling that Alex wasn't really listening. He was nodding at the right times, laughing when he should, but his eyes stayed focused on the road, like he was concentrating too hard. We got to the restaurant, and things seemed fine at first. The place was dimly lit and cozy, with candlelit tables and an old radio playing soft Italian music in the background. The waiter came, took our orders, and for a while, Alex seemed normal. Then he started asking strange questions. "Do you live alone?" I hesitated. "No, I have a roommate." A lie. His face didn't change. "What's your apartment number?" he asked next, casually twirling his fork in his pasta. My stomach tightened. I forced a laugh. "Why? Are you planning on breaking in?" He smirked, setting his fork down. "Wouldn't need to break in if you invited me." I felt my skin crawl. The rest of the dinner, I kept the conversation light, distant. He noticed. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. When the check came, I reached for my purse. "No," Alex said. "I got it." I expected the usual "don't worry about it," or "it's my treat." But instead, he just said, "I already planned for this." Planned? That word sent a small ripple of unease through me. We left the restaurant, stepping into the cold night air. He led me to his car, unlocking the doors. And then, that feeling hit me again. That deep, stomach-dropping instinct that something was wrong. I didn't want to get in his car. Not now. "I think I'll just grab a cab," I said, forcing a smile. Alex's head tilted slightly, the way a dog reacts to a strange noise. "Why?" I tried to laugh it off. I drank more than I thought, and I'd rather not risk getting carsick. For a second, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Of course." But his fingers tightened around the car keys. I turned toward the sidewalk, reaching for my phone, my heart hammering. I had only walked a few steps when I heard it. Footsteps. Following me. I picked up my pace, my breath coming fast. The street was too quiet, the restaurants already closing, the sidewalks nearly empty. Then, from behind me, "Let me drive you home." I froze. Not because of the words, because of how close his voice was. I turned my head slightly. Alex was right behind me. Too close. I forced a laugh. "It's okay. My friend lives nearby. I'll just crash at her place." His smile didn't fade. Then he took a step closer. "No, really," he said, softly. That's when I saw his hand. Reaching. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't look back. I just sprinted down the street, my heels clacking against the pavement, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. I could hear him following me, his footsteps quick, heavy. Then, a bus pulled up to the curb ahead of me. Without thinking, I lunged toward the doors, my heart pounding as they hissed open. I threw myself inside, nearly stumbling as I grabbed onto a pole. The doors slammed shut behind me. I turned, gasping, searching the sidewalk. Alex was gone. The street was empty. No running footsteps. No shadow in the distance. Just nothing. Like he had never been there. I sat down, my whole body trembling. The driver gave me a strange look in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" I nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at my friend's place, not wanting to be alone. The next morning, I woke up to 2 texts, both from an unknown number. The first one said, "Why did you run?" The second one, "I already planned for this." My stomach dropped. I blocked the number, deleted the dating app, changed my locks. But for weeks after, I kept seeing a black car parked near my building. Different spots, different angles, but always watching. And sometimes, when I'm walking home late at night, I hear footsteps behind me. Slow, measured, like he's still following, still waiting. I always hated hotels. It's something about the sterility of them. The way everything feels just a little too clean, a little too staged. The way the hallways are always too quiet, except for the occasional, muffled sound of a TV or a door closing somewhere far down the corridor. But that Valentine's weekend, I didn't have much of a choice. I had been dating Eric for about 6 months. Things were going well, not fireworks. It's stable, easy. He was the kind of guy who planned ahead, made dinner reservations weeks in advance, and always had a backup plan. So when he suggested a weekend getaway at a historic hotel, I figured it was a nice way to spend some time together. It wasn't until we pulled up to the place that I realized something felt wrong. The Fairmont Grand was old, beautiful in a way that suggested its best years were behind it. It had that classic charm, with its marble floors and ornate chandeliers, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way the front desk clerk barely looked at us, or the way the bellhop wouldn't meet my eyes as he took our bags. Or maybe it was just the feeling I got when we stepped into the elevator. Like the building was holding its breath. Our room was on the 7th floor. It was nice, large, with a king-sized bed, a balcony, and a huge antique mirror mounted on the wall across from the bed. The moment I walked in, though, my skin prickled. The air was stale, like the room hadn't been aired out in years. Eric didn't seem to notice. He flopped onto the bed, scrolling through his phone while I explored the space. That's when I noticed the closet. It was slightly open, just an inch. Not enough to see inside, but enough to unsettle me. Did housekeeping forget to shut this? I muttered, walking over. I reached for the handle, and the door slammed shut. Eric jolted upright. What was that? I took a step back, my hand still hovering where the knob had been. I don't know. Maybe a draft? But there was no air vent near the closet. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease. Creepy old buildings, right? Eric smirked. Adds to the charm. I let it go. That night, we had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and by the time we got back to the room, I had almost convinced myself that I imagined it. Almost. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up. The room was pitch black, the kind of darkness that feels thick, like it's pressing down on you. Then I realized something. The closet door was open again. Just an inch. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. Maybe Eric got up and opened it? Maybe it hadn't really been shut all the way? Then, the sound of breathing. Not mine. Not Eric's. Low. Ragged. Coming from the closet. I reached out and shook Eric's arm, whispering his name. He groaned, half asleep. What? The closet, I whispered. It's open again. He turned his head slightly, eyes still heavy with sleep. So close it, he mumbled. I wanted to scream at him. Didn't he hear it? Didn't he feel it? I sat up slowly, my breath shaky. The room felt colder, the air thicker. The breathing stopped. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, using the screen's glow to illuminate the room. The closet was open wider now. For inches. The darkness inside was too deep, like the light couldn't quite reach beyond the doorway. And then, the mirror. In its reflection, I saw something standing inside the closet. Tall, thin, just waiting. A pair of sunken, hollow eyes stared at me through the darkness. The mouth stretched too wide in a grin that didn't belong on any human face. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then, it tilted its head, and the door slammed shut again. I screamed. Eric bolted upright. What the hell? I scrambled out of bed, flicking on every light in the room. The closet was shut tight. My whole body was shaking. Eric looked at me, half annoyed, half concerned. Are you okay? I pointed at the mirror. There was something in the closet. He frowned, rubbing his face. Babe, you were dreaming. I turned back to the mirror. The reflection was normal. Just me, pale and trembling. But I knew what I saw. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Eric I wanted to leave early. He thought I was overreacting but agreed, probably just to keep the peace. As we packed, I kept glancing at the closet, half expecting the door to creak open again. But it didn't. Not until we were about to walk out. I grabbed my bag and turned for one last look. The closet door was open again, just an inch, and this time, something was inside. I didn't look directly, didn't let my gaze linger, because in the mirror, I could see the hollow-eyed thing watching me, grinning, like it knew, like it was waiting for me to come back. I shut the door and never looked back. We checked out without any issues, and by the time we were on the highway, Eric was already joking about my hotel paranoia. But I didn't laugh. That night, at home, I left my closet door wide open, and when I turned my mirror to face the wall, I swore, just for a second, I heard something scratching at the inside of the glass. I've always felt safest in the woods. That's where I grew up, on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by miles of dense forest. My parents weren't the overprotective type, so I spent most of my childhood exploring the woods alone, building forts, following deer trails, and listening to the wind move through the trees. So when I got a job as a park ranger after college, it felt natural. It wasn't a career I had planned, but it paid well enough, and I liked the solitude. Most of my days were spent patrolling trails, checking campsites, and occasionally helping lost hikers find their way back. Then, last February, I found something in the woods that made me realize I had never really been alone out there. It was early morning when I got the call from dispatch. A hiker had stumbled across an abandoned cabin in a remote part of the park. Normally, that wouldn't be anything unusual. There were plenty of old hunting cabins scattered throughout the area, but the way the dispatcher hesitated made my skin crawl. The guy who found it, he sounded freaked out, she said something about the inside looking wrong. I asked for more details, but all she had was the GPS coordinates. The hike was about 6 miles deep into the forest, farther than most casual hikers ever ventured. By the time I reached the location, the sun had barely risen, casting long shadows through the trees. And then I saw it. The cabin stood in a small clearing, old but intact. Its wooden walls were gray with age, the roof sagging slightly under the weight of decades. But something about it felt off. It wasn't overgrown like it should have been. No vines creeping up the walls, no fallen leaves piled against the door. It was too clean, like it had been kept up despite being miles away from any main trails. I stepped closer, my boots crunching against the frozen ground. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. I called out. No response. I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something rotting. The room was small, just a single space with a table, a rusted stove, and a mattress in the corner. And then I saw the walls. Every inch of them was covered in carvings. Names. Hundreds of names, scratched deep into the wood. Some were faded, nearly worn away by time. Others looked fresh, the edges of the letters still splintered. My stomach tightened. Who had written them? And more importantly, why? I pulled out my radio. Dispatch. I found the cabin. There's something weird here. Static. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. I stepped back toward the door, every instinct screaming at me to leave. Then I saw the footprints. A single set, leading from the door to the mattress. Bare feet, imprinted deep in the dust. But no prints leading out. Something cracked behind me. I spun, my heart slamming against my ribs. The cabin was empty. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe. It's just an old shelter. There's no one here. But I didn't believe that. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the room. Then, just as I stepped outside, a whisper, not from inside, from the woods, low, hollow, right at the edge of hearing. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing. The forest stretched out, empty and silent. Then I noticed something. A figure, barely visible between the trees. It stood motionless, too far to make out any details. I took a step back. It moved. Not toward me. Not away. Just shifted, like it was adjusting its stance. Watching. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was halfway back to my truck. Lungs burning, legs trembling. When I finally looked back, the figure was gone. But I never shook the feeling that it was still watching. That night, I barely slept. My radio wouldn't stop crackling, bursts of static cutting through the silence of my cabin, even though I had turned it off. Then, just past midnight, a sound outside my window. Soft, slow, footsteps in the snow. I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. The footsteps didn't move away. They stopped, right outside my window. I reached for my flashlight and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness. Footprints, leading from the tree line directly to my cabin. But there was no one there. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I drove straight to the ranger station and filed a report about the cabin. When I told my supervisor what had happened, his face paled. "I know that place," he muttered. He grabbed an old park ledger from the shelf and flipped through the pages. Then he stopped. He turned the book toward me. A list of missing persons, dating back nearly a century. Every one of them had disappeared near that part of the forest. I scanned the names, my hands turning cold. Then my stomach dropped. One of the names, the most recent one, it was carved into the cabin wall. I put in for a transfer the next day. I don't go near that part of the forest anymore. But sometimes, on still, quiet nights, I wake up to the sound of footsteps outside my window. And I know, deep down, the cabin isn't empty. It never was.
Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing.